Welcome and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. As we approach midlife, probably a few of us start looking back on our lives and feeling that sense of the things that perhaps we just didn't accomplish and feeling a little depressed about it. And for some of us, it's even a greater situation than that when it comes to finding out how do we pull ourselves out of that and get on with our lives. On the program today, we're going to be talking about that very thing. The book is titled Depression Free Naturally. It's 7 weeks to eliminating anxiety, despair, fatigue, and anger from your life. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest, Ms. Joan Larson. Joan, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Well, thank you for having me.
Now, this here, you got started on this quest about 30 years ago as a result of the loss of your son, who was trying to successfully complete a 12-step program, and it didn't turn out so well.
Well, he was 16, and his father had died shortly before that of a massive heart attack. So my husband, who was only 40 when he died, so Rob, he truly was in depression, too. But then when he found that he could drink a fair amount, and only people that can drink a fair amount, because alcoholism is truly basically a physical disease. If you can't drink in large amounts, you can't be alcoholic. But he began to drink like mad. He had a grandfather on my husband's side that was alcoholic. Anyway, when he went to treatment today is still, 12-step is still a popular approach to treating alcoholism. Maybe 95% of all treatment is 12-step, and it consists entirely of trying to talk away this physical disease. At any rate, when he came home, he almost immediately took his life. He committed suicide. So that was the second death. It was way too close to the first death, and I simply was driven to try to understand what had happened, what could have been done that wasn't done in the name of treatment, and we evolved slowly but very carefully into a very successful 6-week program where we not only treat alcoholism and addiction, but we treat anxiety and depression and unstable moods of all sorts and eating disorders. And all of them have one basic underlying cause, and this is very broad, but it starts not as a psychological something or another, but it starts as a biochemical mistake or need in our brains or bodies. And in the 21st century, we can do labs that show us what's wrong. I mean, there's many avenues to go down when it comes to depression, for instance. Underlying cause could be that the neurotransmitters aren't firing right, or that the person is hypoglycemic, loves sugar and lives on it, and that always results in a type of depression, among other things. Or pyroluria, where the brain can't keep its zinc and B6, and or other nutrient deficiencies, or thyroid deficiencies causes a plaque depression. Brain allergies, responses where the brain gets hijacked behind foods or chemicals it can't handle, or heavy metals that build up in the brain that can be identified and removed, or very low cholesterol in the brain leads absolutely to suicide. So when you're lowering your cholesterol, remember to stop before it gets too low. Certainly if it goes below 100, you're out of control in that you're going to be depressed and suicidal.
You know, Joan, just thinking about that for a minute, when you say, obviously a lot of people by now have heard the messages about maintain control, or if you need to lower your cholesterol, and just hitting on that point, there is so much out there when it comes to information of people saying one thing and then saying something totally different. You just want to tell all these doctors to shut up and stay off the television and maybe stay in the clinic where they belong. Now, tell us what's going on there. I mean, what really is going on there with the messages?
I mean, why do some not seem to get it? I honestly think they're on the golf course instead of reading the psychiatric and medical journals.
Right.
Because it's all in there, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't like it's never been written or no one knows it. For example, we know that if you take statins and you don't resupply the coenzyme Q10, your heart is going to act up seriously and maybe fatally. So there's a lot to know when you begin to choose a drug. Drugs are not like natural chemicals that have no dark side. And so we have always favored using the real chemicals that from the blueprint of life. I figure God knew what he was doing. If you use a drug instead, they can't replace those chemicals. There is no way they can. They alter the brain in different ways. They may speed up a system or change the route or something, but they cannot, for instance, if you're short of zinc, put zinc into your brain. So it's much safer, and with labs, it's absolutely a straight shot. Once you see what you need, you can fine-tune your brain to be on an even keel, to feel good, to simply adjust your mood so that life is worth getting up for in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, obviously your approach is really successful because you've begun to franchise pretty much your health recovery centers. You're growing, and so you're talking about.
I was just going to say that what we're doing, I can't take credit for. It's orthomolecular medicine, and that began in the in the last century with a group that were all psychiatrists and all men, but they wanted not to use drugs if they could use the real chemical. And so this whole idea of searching for identifying in the body what's too much or too little of really essential substances that create different emotional, what seems like emotional stability or instability. That's all. We think of it all going on in the mind, but Linus Pauling, who I hope you remember, he won the Nobel Prize by himself twice. He was the one that gave it a name, orthomolecular, and he defined it as that we would provide the optimum molecular environment for the mind by giving the brain, making sure the brain has concentrations of the substances that are needed in sufficient amounts. And the odd part about all of this, because we do a lot of therapy too. We're licensed and we're expected to do that. But the turnaround where people rise from the ashes is so fast with putting back, especially in the brain, these real chemicals that they should have had enough of, that you and I have enough of, so we're not depressed, kind of thing. And it just is such common sense to do, and it has no dark side. So, and in fact, people get well enough that they finally look at their therapist and say, well, kindly, thank you for your help, but now that my brain is working, I think I can choose my own life, and they can. So.
Well, not to mention, it sounds, too, like they begin to not only make better decisions, but, the lows, if you will, they do come along in life, and they just kind of move through those. Is that kind of how it works?
Well, we all know the ups and downs that life throws at us,
right.
But how we survive them depends on how balanced we are emotionally and biochemically. We can put up with a lot and be optimistic that tomorrow will be better if we have a lot of calming neurotransmitters and so forth, and we're feeling stable. But if we're not, sometimes, in fact, I can think of friends that where terrible things have happened, and they just shut down they don't fight back for a long time. And the way back that is absolutely something you don't have to worry about how you think. All you have to do is give the brain what it needs, what it doesn't have enough of. Sometimes there's too much of certain things, like people whose minds race. And these are creative people that do great things and are always energetic and so forth. But oftentimes that will cause in that type of person an abnormal histamine level in the brain where the brain just races. It races too much, and it causes a lack of methylation and a depression that they can't get out of. Mm-hmm. And the way back is to lower the histamine, and the methylation comes up, and the depression goes away, and they sleep again, and they're still very creative and everything they have been. Mm-hmm. So that's the beauty of fine-tuning anyone. The people we see are so far out of joint that it takes, well, it doesn't take a long time, but it takes serious looking at possibilities and then testing to prove or disprove that we're on the right track.
Now, let's go ahead and start with a real basic one, if you will. When you talk about alcoholism, you say in your book that it's been able to clearly establish that there's a genetic and nutritional connection to alcoholism. Describe that for us and the path that you have been taking or that's being taken, where you say that once people really, decide that they don't want to do this anymore, they not only end the craving, but also the psychological desire, I guess, as well.
Well, the psychological desire may not end because the cravings end in that some people have been living with depression or anxiousness all their lives. And the alcohol, that oasis when they're drinking, they don't feel that. And so to get them to walk away from the only thing that gives them some relief is really hard. But you certainly, biochemically, there is a chemistry that underlies alcoholism. They're all hypoglycemic. In other words, they have a hard time maintaining the fuel for the brain. And when that drops, the mood drops and the signaling wildly for sugar begins. The brain has to have its glucose, the only thing it functions with. And what happens then is that alcohol is the fastest sugar to the brain that we know. So alcoholics immediately think, I got to have a drink. And as it goes on, it's, I have to have a drink. And they do. They go back to using. And unlike my chemistry, which is non-alcoholic, I don't get addicted to alcohol. Well, I suppose it's because I can't drink that much. Non-alcoholics could never keep up with the amounts that alcoholics can drink. However, once cravings stop, and they stop by correcting the hypoglycemia so that the brain isn't doing that, demanding sugar, glucose, alcohol all the time, and also there's the adrenals are exhausted from stress, repairing those so that you got some get up and go and strength and so forth, fixing what's broken. Then they don't get cravings. Then the second half of that is lift the depression, lift the anxiety. And one amazing thing after 32 years in business, looking at everyone's labs, we find that about half of all the people who are there for alcoholism are pyroluric. And let me just quickly explain that. Pyrules are just a waste product of red blood cells, but they're scavengers, and before they dump out, they go into the brain and they load up all the zinc and B6 from the brain they can carry out. Doesn't matter if you only got 3 or 4 pyrules. Alcoholics have 20, 50, 200 pyrules. Their brains never have the benefit of the zinc that in the brain is a buffer against stress coming at them, or the B6, which prevents their anxiety. So that's got to be solved, and it is completely solvable. But someone's got to recognize and do what's necessary. How an alcoholic is supposed to just stop drinking and go to AA and talk about it or pray about it is insane in the 21st century. Science knows that alcoholism begins genetically. Mm-hmm. We know that from many different studies. Twin studies. If they're identical twins, they'll both be alcoholic. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. If they're fraternal twins, not really true. So, and there's many, many others that I don't think we even are debating anymore that alcoholism is essentially the underlying cause is a gift in chemistry. And with saying that, I would hope that people everywhere will back off on their rough opinions of alcoholics, because it's another disease that's being struggled with. It isn't a deliberate craziness that they just want to do to themselves. Mm-hmm. And it's entirely fixable.
Fascinating. Now, I know that your book is really in-depth, especially when it comes to, I guess, for lack of a better word, cocktails that people can begin to put together for themselves to be able to nourish the brain as well as the body. And it seems to me, especially this day and age, that maybe nutrition, well, not maybe, nutrition seems to really be the thing that maybe offsets a lot of us. And then, you know, even on our program here, we've talked about this quite a bit when it comes to neurobiology, is this day and age, there is so much coming at us telling us what we should be and how we should feel. And if we're not feeling these things, well, we've got this answer here for you. So we live in an age of anxiety automatically by default due to the messages, and so no wonder we've become a drug-addicted society. And then you take a look at, then the legal system steps in and then punishes you for going the direction you were basically told you should be going in the first place. And it could drive a person pretty much nuts after a while.
That's true. And, you know, today there's another centerpiece to treatment, and that is the crazy idea that there's a magic pill if you see your psychiatrist. Uh-huh. Psychiatrists are not, they're the only branch of medicine that don't do any lab testing. They just write prescriptions.
Well, that sounds like this. You need this.
They aren't for the underlying cause. They don't know the underlying cause. It's for the symptoms. But if you run that out, the psychoactive drugs, of what happens to someone who lingers on them, it's a horror story. And we treat those people from all over the country. I have come to the point where I will no longer treat people who've been on benzodiazepines for 10 years or more. We can take them off, but we can never return them to what I call normal, because it must be structurally or something. They just don't. They have changed just radically. They hate the drug now, but they really can't live without it. And it has never solved anxiety. Mm-hmm. It works for about 3 or 4 weeks, according to psychiatry's own journals. And after that, you need more to do the same thing, and more until it owns you. So, and that's just typical of the way psychiatric drugs work. Whereas if you replace the real chemicals, there's no dark side to that. You'll be fine. And the shortages we find run right through families. If we treat someone who's been depressed all their lives, and we discover the underlying cause is, and I mean, name whatever, say thyroid, low thyroid, the rest of the family who's suffering from depression very commonly have that same underlying cause. So
one of the things that I really found pretty interesting, too, is how valuable vitamin B is for the brain and the body.
Well, yeah, without the B vitamins, we'd be insane. I mean, because they do so much to stabilize us. But then on the other hand, the essential fatty acids run the brain, 2/3 of the essential fatty acids. And all the B vitamins sit on a straight in the brain. So you need combination things like the oils that are fish oils and the B vitamins. And if people would only try these things, they would see that they're taking back their power, that they are feeling better, and they know why. And in my books, I go into detail about what each thing does. Those books have gone into strange languages, Japanese and Russian and Finnish and so forth. So I know it's a worldwide need that as we age, we run out of, or certainly run down on these precious chemicals that have kept us alive and kicking. But you can put them back. If you don't put them back, you're going to have all kinds of illnesses finally that you're trying to treat with toxic drugs. So
book is quite extensive. For those of you just joining us, we're talking about the book Depression Free Naturally. Our guest, Joan Matthews Larson. And, this here, it's really interesting, even as because there's so much to it, you really got to take your time working through the book and taking things step by step. And a lot of times we live in an age where people feel that they need quick action and quick responses, so they might take a look and go, well, this looks like too much work. Well, think about how you're living. Doesn't that take quite a bit of work if it's not working for you? And you give a lot of great things in here about how people, for instance, weaning yourself off of things. Like, for instance, I used to, and I still love coffee, but I haven't had a cup of coffee probably in 5 years.
You sound like
me. And I had been drinking coffee, literally since I was a young teenager. I love the smell of it and the taste of it, that kind of thing. But I finally decided at one point that I kind of wanted to stop. And I heard a lot from people, well, you don't want to quit cold turkey because you get these terrible headaches. I never experienced that, but I also quit where I slowly weaned down to where I was at 2 cups in the morning, then it was just a cup in the morning, and then eventually I just decided I didn't want to have it anymore. And it took a while, but I started noticing very subtle differences that were pretty big, actually. And when you take a look at somebody, for instance, who wants to quit drinking, a couple of things that they may have in their lives, are coffee and cigarettes. I've been to AA meetings, and it seems that they're putting away the alcohol, but then again they're drinking, 6 pots of coffee and smoking 8 packs of cigarettes a day, and you're thinking,
right, and the sugar,
what's the point?
From other places now the sugar appears. So, yeah, it's to just shift to realizing, because I know most of us think that our minds are running the show, and the truth is the human mind can't operate in a vacuum. It's totally dependent on our brains. That molecular function that's going on that creates our emotional health. If you want a sane mind, you can only have it with an organically healthy brain. So in this century, well, last century it began. We never knew for almost 1 million years what we ran on, these chemicals. Now we do. Of course, as soon as the drug companies have gone out and left field because you can't make money on these natural chemicals.
Sure.
But these things are the ticket to health and to being proud of yourself as you see yourself being able to heal yourself.
Right. Now, Joan, do you have a website people can find out more about your program and how they can get the book?
I do. It's www.healthrecovery, all one word, healthrecovery.com.
Fascinating stuff. Like I said, the book is definitely, it's pretty extensive, but it's also fascinating just to read and discover a lot of things. And it doesn't seem like you're being general in what you describe here, but you get specific in what you can specifically do. So for people out there listening, there's a lot of encouragement here. You're going to feel like, wow, I can actually get my life back. And want to thank you for being able to do that. Give your website out again one more time.
It is healthrecovery.com. I'll give you a phone number, too. It's 800-554-9155.
Joan Larson, again, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
It's a pleasure.
You bet. The book is Depression Free Naturally, 7 weeks to eliminating anxiety, despair, fatigue, and anger from your life. We want to thank you for tuning in. I'm Daniel Davis. Be sure to visit us at our website at beyond50radio.com. We do have a link there so you can find out how to go about getting depression-free naturally. Again, thank you for joining us. This is the Beyond 50 radio show, and remember, live your day past